Well, considering the summarizing strategies, first we need to know how we summarize. First it's a reproduction of someone's work by acknowledging the source. That means we present a summary of a piece of text and we actually mention the source. We include the main points in the summary because we cannot mention all the details, let's say all the examples. If there are examples, for example, that are fully developed, we have to only mention them. It retains 1/5 or 1/4 of the original text. That means it must be almost 20%, 25 to 30% of the whole length of the text itself, and it should not include your opinions, your comments, or your evaluation, since it's a summary. So a summary must be objective. You're not allowed to include your personal opinion because you are summarizing a piece of text that belongs to somebody else. So there are 5 different purposes for summarizing. The first is to understand the main points. This is a strategy that you can apply when you want to prepare for, let's say, your final exams. You can summarize the important points of a chapter, for example, the book, and then you can easily refer to the main points and have a review of what you've already studied. The other is to understand the writer's argument, to communicate understanding to others, to present the context of the information, and finally to cite the source and acknowledge the writer's ideas in your own words. So these are many different purposes for summarizing. So there are generally 2 types of summaries. The first is informative and the second is descriptive. As you can see here, when we say informative, we say it maintains the tone of the original text. So an informative summary focuses on the content of the text. Okay, we say it focuses on the content as it does not cite the writer and the title of the text. In an informative summary, we do not, let's say, mention the writer, and we do not, let's say, mention the title of the text. We only talk about the main information and the main content that is presented in the summary. That is why we call it informative. On the other hand, we have descriptive summaries, in which we mention the name of the writer, we mention the text or the source. As you can see, we say it focuses on original text rather than its content, as it differentiates between the writer of the original text and the writer of the summary. Descriptive summaries are mainly used in reviews, for example, in product reviews, because in a review, or for example, in analyzing text, when we are reviewing something, like for example, when we are reviewing a text or when we are analyzing a text, so we need to mention the source, we need to mention the name of the writer. Like for example, in a product review, when we mention the name of the product. So there are generally 2 different strategies for summarizing. One of them is selection and deletion, and one of them is note taking. But what do we mean by selection and deletion? So let me explain it first. The first strategy, which is selection and deletion, is when you read, let's say, a piece of text, let's say a paragraph, you can highlight, you can select or underline the important sentences that include the main points, and then the rest of the sentences can be removed. Okay? So then, or all you need to do is to highlight or underline the important first, the main idea, the topic sentence of the paragraph, let's say the major supports. And then you can, let's say, highlight or underline only examples to be mentioned without, let's say, explaining them, without discussing them as they have been, for example, in the original text. So this is the first strategy. This is an easy one. Another strategy is note taking. Like for example, while you're reading a piece of text, you can take notes of your own. So in this way, it's almost like paraphrasing. That means you summarize, but you use your own words. While you take notes, then later you can use your notes and develop your own summary using your own sentences and using your own words. So both are possible. In the first one, in which we have selection and deletion, we bring the exact, let's say, sentence and words from the text. But in note taking, we can take notes about, for example, the main idea of the paragraph. We can take notes about the major supports, and then we can explain them in our own words. This is the anatomy of a summary. The first part is the introductory sentence. You need to know this. A summary must be only one paragraph. So we don't have an introductory paragraph like an introduction. Instead, we have an introductory sentence. So look, we say write an introductory sentence by citing the source and use a reporting verb. To introduce the main idea, you need to include the controlling idea in the first sentence. So, in the first sentence, you need to first mention the name of the writer. You need to mention, for example, the year, and you need to mention the main claim, which is the thesis statement of a whole essay, if you're summarizing an essay. So the sentence to be used at the beginning of a summary can be a restatement, or it can be the thesis statement itself. All you need to do is to add the writer's name at the beginning and using a report verb that says that, for example, this person is, let's say, having this opinion. There is an example here. Then part 2 is the body. The body, we do not mean body paragraphs, we mean the body of the paragraph, because as I told you, the summary is only one paragraph. So the body is the statements, is the sentences. Like, for example, if you are summarizing an essay, you need to choose the topic sentences of all the paragraphs, and when you put them all together, that becomes the body of your summary. And it's not only the topic sentences. From each paragraph, you may need to, let's say, choose some certain information that is important, like the major support, and you use the topic sentences and the major support, or the main, let's say, points of the paragraph, and that becomes the body of your summary. And finally, we have the conclusion, which is optional, as you can see here. This part is optional. You do not need to restate the article's controlling idea unless you are instructed to do so. So if you are asked to include one concluding sentence in your summary, all you need to do is to paraphrase the first sentence of your summary, but you need to exclude, that means you need to remove the name of the writer. We do not have citation in the concluding sentence. Well, we have 9 steps of writing a good summary. You can go through them. These are, let's say, the steps are the summary of what I told you about how to write a summary. And here we have some reporting verbs. You can use them. You can refer to them while you're writing a summary. Verbs, for example, reporting verbs that are neutral, like state, report, explain. By neutral, we mean these are the verbs that show, let's say, no-taking side with something. We have speculative, like suggest, recommend. That is, for example, when we are not sure about something, we use suggest, we recommend. Strong, and here we have some examples, like, for example, the writer goes on to say that. So, you can use the final slides of, let's say, week 4 as a reference. Whenever you are writing a summary, you can refer to them, and you can use many different verbs. You need to know, let's say, many different verbs to avoid repetition, not to use, for example, one verb many times. And we have appropriate language, which is the discourse markers. You know what discourse markers are. We have already talked about them. These are the words that are used normally at the beginning of the sentence, and they show the relationship between what was already said and what is going to be said. So here's the list of these discourse markers with their functions. For example, those that express comparison, those that express contrast, those that express conclusion, and let's say summary, those that are intended to clarify, and those that are intended to show cause and effect, at a point, and finally indicating sequence. So as I told you, try to refer to them when you're writing a summary, and try to use as many different discourse markers as possible in your writing. Well, thank you very much. That was all about week 4.